What's up everybody, this is Ven, and I welcome you to the Mock Spotlight, where we take apart what you build. For today's episode, we'll be going over Dionysus, the God of Mischief, created and posted on our message boards by none other than TolerantAxe97. So before we get into this mock and its quirks and all this and that, let me tell you about my method of reviewing, which involves a point system that is based on 3 fundamental attributes: the overall appearance of the mock, the build of the mock itself, and the concept and ideas behind this mock's creation. Each quality will mount up to 5 points, leading up to a final score that will be determined at the end of the episode. And please remember, this is all based on my opinion, so let's get this started. So the first thing I thought when I saw this mock was, holy crap, this thing is so big. Why is it so big? Why'd you make this so big? What are you doing? Just stop. Stop getting so big. Stop. The size of this mock is indeed impressive, so let's take a good bit to look at all the little details and features and such, starting from the ground up. So we look at the feet. This guy could use some nice new toenail clippers. Yep, toenail clippers for sure. The feet, I have to say, are probably my least favorite part about this mock. I'm not a big fan of the claws protruding out from the individual toes. I think the toes would actually look fine without the little claws, or not little at all, without the big freaking claws sticking out of them. Sure, they add to the character of the mock, but they just don't really look all too good to me. They look a bit awkward compared to the rest of the mock. The legs, however, look pretty good on their own, but I noticed that once we move upward past the legs, that the legs have a bit more of a complex aesthetic style when compared to the torso and the head, which both have this smooth, plated, armored style to them. And this style is also absent in the arms, which are probably my second least favorite part about this mock. These arms are very, very flimsy in comparison to the rest of this mock. I mean, I'm sure by themselves they're probably the size of a toddler's forearm or something. But I think these arms could have used a little bit more bulk and some of that armored plating style, and I think that would have made for a more cohesive look, because this mock does a fairly good job at maintaining cohesion. I mean, we have a very consistent color scheme of silver and black and gray, pretty much nothing but little bits of red here and there, but it's still a really limited color palette. But I guess when it comes down to it and you're using so many silver parts as is, the dude probably just ran out. I mean, that's an easy conclusion to make, don't you think? Another thing I want to bring up are the proportions of this mock, which are a bit disturbing. Just a little bit though, nothing horrible, just a little bit disturbing. Because we have a very tiny torso. Well, okay, see, I say very tiny, yet this entire mock is like the size of a boulder. So let me rephrase. The torso is smaller than it probably should be when you look at the legs being so long and the arms being so tiny. I think the arms are like the big problem here, but if you made the arms bigger, then it would also look a little, well, I don't know. I guess what this mock lacks in proportions and whatnot, it makes up for in design choices, because you look at the torso and you look at the head. The head especially is the best design on this mock. I can say that without a doubt, no buts about it. It's pretty obvious that a lot of thought was put into the design of the head. I mean, it has some pretty great character just put into it. All these little details and whatnot. It's pretty great. Very, very malevolent looking. And I think it's pretty neat if you can exhibit some sort of emotion or sense of evil just out of little pieces of plastic. And then the aesthetic of the torso is just incredible. This alongside the head really exemplify, they really highlight how much detail can be put into a creation, with the right amount of parts, of course. Because like I mentioned earlier, this is a huge mock. And one final note that I will make about this mock's appearance is that I can't help but get a Mechagodzilla vibe just from looking at this mock. So good on you for reminding me of my childhood and how awesome it is. Or was. Sigh. Meanwhile, we take a look at the build of this mock. And I guess it would only make sense to look at it from the ground up again. These legs, I don't like the feet, but these legs look to be just the right amount of sturdy and bulk needed to hold a mock like this up in place. I mean, it doesn't even look like they're articulated like at all at the knees. Just looks like they're really meant to just keep this Smock standing up more than anything else. I mean, there's a lot of chunk here, and they definitely look like they do the job. I am still curious about articulation, but you know, if they're not articulated at all, besides the feet, I mean, the feet look articulated a little bit. Looks like you can actually bend them side to side or something. I mean, that's fine. But just looking at the sheer amount of thought that must have gone into this, I mean, just look at all these parts and how they were put together. This is a really creative usage of parts. And speaking of creative usage of parts, let's move up to the torso and the head so we can talk a bit more about those, because these also incredibly exemplify the creative usage of parts here. I mean, everything here looks to flow together so perfectly. Just look at the neck and how seamlessly it connects to the head. I mean, it's almost like I'm looking at an action figure rather than a Lego creation. But then that impression gets a little set off when I look at the arms again, because a lot more parts here are exposed, and you can easily see how these are barely connecting to the torso. It's a bit odd. I definitely think these arms could have used a bit more coverage and maybe a bit more support. Oh, and since I didn't mention this earlier, I do enjoy these claws on the hands, but I think they also kind of prove the point that the arms are a bit too small, because these claws, Dionysus could just rip off his own arms just by like scratching his armpit or something. I also kind of have to note how this Smock looks like the dude just used his entire silver parts collection and crammed it all together into one creation. And I say this because of the variety of parts that are being used here. I mean, you have launchers mixed in with Hero Factory, CCBS shell pieces, and all these various weapons that were used in BIONICLE. And what's great about noting this is that it doesn't look like a big pile of crap. Silver crap, specifically. No, there's like an actual bit of cohesion and a very creative usage of all these parts, as I mentioned. Now, before I continue to repeat myself, I'm just gonna go ahead and move on, talk a bit more about the concepts. First off, I want to say that the name choice is quite interesting, considering that Dionysus was actually the Greek god of wine making, the almighty god of grapes. I'm guessing that this creation is completely unrelated to the Greek god, especially considering that this creation is supposed to be the god of mischief, and he doesn't look capable of making grapes. If anything, he's capable of eating grapes and raisins, and all the farmers that distribute grapes and raisins. Whatever, it's the dude's first mock posted on the internet. He can say, call it whatever he wants. No one's gonna judge him, hopefully. Well, anyway, this is supposedly the god of mischief, and with that kind of face, I'm pretty convinced. As I already praised earlier, there's a good bit of characterization that is well represented in the design of this head. It looks like there's some sort of evil or a sort of mean expression on the face, and then those teeth don't look like the teeth of a nice guy. And I also appreciate the addition of these horns on the top of the head, sort of like a nod to Loki, whom everybody knows is the Norse god of mischief. I mean, it's kind of common knowledge by now, unless you're like unfamiliar with the Marvel movies or life, you know. However, aside from the design of the head and the claws that he has on his hands, nothing else about this Smock really screams mischief. No, it's just kind of the way he is. I would say that maybe some spikes all around his body or something could probably complement the head and further show a sense of mischief, but this is actually fine. I think the head alone does a really good job with that. Also, did I ever mention how cool this sword is? Anyway, the big idea behind this Smock was actually just to be a gigantic mock. I mean, the builder does have quite a bit of a backstory for this guy, but I just want to acknowledge that the main goal behind this creation was to make a Bionicle creation as big as the builder possibly could, and he ended up doing it. I mean, it measures at approximately 30 inches tall, including the head spikes, and he hasn't weighed it, but he guarantees that it's very heavy. And you know what? I believe you. Good job. And let's move on to the final scores so we can end this after all. So in terms of appearance, I give this mock a 4 out of 5. This Smock is incredibly huge. I think this is probably one of the largest mocks I've seen yet. That alone is a very amazing feature. However, there are still a few things such as the awkward proportions and a few design choices that I'm not a big fan of. But I can easily say what I am a big fan of is that head. That head sells it for me. But in terms of the build, I think this also deserves a 4 out of 5. This creation looks really well built, very well solidified. Those legs do a very good job at doing what they're doing, and the builder showed a very creative usage of all of his parts, probably his entire silver collection. But I am still curious about this Smock's articulation capabilities. I mean, I know that's a bit much to ask when it comes to a mock this huge. You know, it's still something that I look for. Also, those arms could use a bit more work. And finally, the concept and ideas behind this mock receive a 5 out of 5. You know, I once had a similar goal of pushing my limits and creating the largest mock that I possibly could, and mine turned out to be a piece of crap. I mean, it looked horrible, but this mock, this builder had the same goal, and he did it a lot better than I could imagine myself doing it. He successfully created a large mock that looks good. That's it, it looks good. And while it's supposed to be the God of Mischief, I could see it as a God of Mischief. It looks that imposing, and with that size, it's very godlike. And so now we narrow it down to the final score, and the final score would be a 13 out of 15. You did a very great job, TolerantAxe97. I'm looking forward to see more creations posted by you. And as for the rest of you viewers, if you would also like a chance to be featured on the Mock Spotlight, please post your creations to the TTV message boards located at board.ttvpodcast.com. Just post your creation in the LEGO Creations category. I mean, I check that place out all the time, so you'll have a higher possibility of me recognizing you if you just post your creation there. Just do it. And of course, thank you all for watching. Be sure to rate, comment, subscribe, do your job. I will continue to do mine. Now, goodbye.